Top WWE star reached out to Kevin Nash after his heart procedure. Kevin Nash had a heart procedure, and you know who reached out to check on him? Cody Rhodes. The undisputed WWE Champion, the man currently carrying the company on his back, took time out of his schedule to text a legend and ask how his cardioversion went. And honestly, in an industry historically known for egos the size of stadiums and grudges that last decades, this might be the most wholesome wrestling news we've had all year. But before you get too misty-eyed, let's dig into what this actually tells us about modern WWE, the culture Triple H is building, and why Kevin Nash casually dropping this information on his podcast is more significant than it might seem at first glance. Because here's the thing. Wrestling has never been particularly known for its warm and fuzzy interpersonal relationships. This is an industry built on competition, backstabbing, politicking, and holding people down. The stories of wrestlers refusing to help each other, veterans burying younger talent, and top stars protecting their spots at all costs are legendary. So when someone like Cody Rhodes, who's at the absolute peak of his career, takes time to check on Kevin Nash after a health scare, that's not just nice. That's a fundamental shift in how business is being done. And it says everything about where WWE is right now compared to where it's been. Right, let's establish what actually happened here because context matters. Last month, Kevin Nash revealed he'd been dealing with an irregular heartbeat. Not ideal for anyone, but especially concerning for a man who's 65 years old and spent decades taking insane bumps, working through injuries, and living the wrestler lifestyle that's notorious for being absolutely terrible for long-term health. Nash needed a cardioversion procedure, which for those not familiar, is essentially where they use controlled electric shocks to reset your heart rhythm. It's not open-heart surgery, but it's also not exactly a pleasant afternoon at the spa. Nash later updated his fans that the procedure went smoothly, which is brilliant news because Big Sexy is a legitimately beloved figure in wrestling history. The man was part of the NWO, one of the most influential factions ever. He was WWE Champion. He's a Hall of Famer. He's also refreshingly honest on his podcast about the realities of the wrestling business, which makes him essential listening for anyone who wants to understand the industry beyond the scripted storylines. So when Nash mentioned on Click This that Cody Rhodes reached out to check on him, it wasn't just throwaway information. It was a window into how relationships work in modern WWE. Now, Cody Rhodes checking in on Kevin Nash might seem like basic human decency, and it is, but in wrestling terms it's also politically smart and culturally significant. Cody's not just some mid-card wrestler trying to make friends. He's the undisputed champion. He's the face of the company. He's the guy WWE is building around for the foreseeable future. He doesn't need to text Kevin Nash. Nash isn't in a position to help or hurt Cody's career at this point. There's no transactional benefit to reaching out. Which means Cody did it because he's either genuinely a decent person, or he understands the value of maintaining relationships with legends, or most likely both. And here's why that matters. Wrestling is a small world. Everyone knows everyone. Reputations matter. How you treat people, especially legends who've paved the way, gets noticed. Cody Rhodes building genuine relationships with people like Kevin Nash isn't just about being nice. It's about respect for the business, understanding lineage, and recognizing that today's champions are standing on the shoulders of yesterday's giants. Nash was a top guy when Cody was just starting to understand what wrestling even was. That kind of connection across generations is what keeps the industry healthy and ensures knowledge gets passed down rather than lost. But Nash didn't just mention that Cody reached out. He also used the opportunity to talk about creative freedom and how Triple H, or Paul Levesque as Nash calls him, runs things now. Nash was asked whether he thinks Cody has creative input on his matches and storylines, and his answer was revealing. He said that when you're at Cody's level, management absolutely lets you contribute ideas because you know what works for you better than anyone else. And Paul, being a former top guy himself, is a great communicator with talent and understands that collaborative booking often produces better results than dictatorial, "This is what you're doing and you'll like it" booking. This is a massive departure from how WWE operated under Vince McMahon. Not to bury Vince, because the man built an empire and revolutionized the industry, but his approach to creative was famously micromanaging, unpredictable, and often frustrating for the performers. Stories of Vince changing entire shows at the last minute, rejecting ideas for arbitrary reasons, or pushing storylines that made no sense to anyone except him are legendary. Wrestlers had input occasionally, but ultimately Vince's word was law, and what Vince wanted is what happened, regardless of whether it was actually good for business or the performer involved. Triple H's approach is fundamentally different. He came up through the business as a wrestler. He knows what it's like to be handed a terrible idea and told to make it work. He understands that wrestlers have instincts about their characters and what will connect with audiences. So his management style is more collaborative. He listens to ideas. He communicates. He trusts his top stars to know what's best for their presentation. And according to Nash, who's worked with pretty much everyone in the business over multiple decades, this approach makes everyone's job easier and usually produces better content. Nash's point about Paul not wanting to book a guy when he's got an idea that might be easier for him to accomplish is crucial. Wrestling is hard enough when you're fully invested in the story and believe in what you're doing. When you're being forced to execute someone else's vision that doesn't make sense to you or doesn't fit your character, it's exponentially harder to perform at a high level. Audiences can sense when something feels forced or when a wrestler isn't fully committed. Giving top stars like Cody Rhodes creative freedom means they're more invested, more passionate, and more likely to deliver performances that genuinely connect with fans. There's also a subtle point here about trust. Triple H trusting Cody Rhodes with creative input is only possible because Cody has proven himself as someone who understands the business, respects the process, and consistently delivers. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in the real stories behind wrestling, the cultural shifts, the management decisions, and the human moments that don't always make headlines. That's exactly what we do here at UK Political Insight, bringing you multiple videos daily breaking down everything happening in wrestling and beyond with this same energy and insight. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button if you enjoyed this deep dive into what a simple text message tells us about modern WWE, and drop a comment with your thoughts on Triple H's management style and whether collaborative creative is the way forward. I'll see you in the next one, and hopefully Kevin Nash's heart continues behaving itself. Cheers.